This is Good Morning Britain with Susanna Reid and Richard Madeley.
We're joined by the Mail's Andrew Pearce and the Mirror's Kevin Maguire. Morning, guys. Nice to see you again.
You didn't opt out of work this morning?
No.
No.
I'm not Gen Z.
Well, let's talk about that.
Most of Gen Z will be going to work or in education or training.
Well, 3 out of 4 of them might. According to your front page, Andrew, this morning, there's 1 in 4 under 25s don't want a job. And the most commonly given reason is their mental health. Explain. What's happening to us?
A lot of this has happened since the pandemic, and they've got to get a grip of this because we've now got, I think it's 22% of the working population is not in work because of a lot of it is to do with mental health issues, and they're living on the benefits. Benefits are supposed to be a safety net, not a way of life, and it's
But why specifically under 25s?
Is
that the hotspot?
It's because I think Wes Streeting said yesterday, the Health Secretary, we are over-diagnosing mental health, and he's right.
Well, yeah, but first of all, you get diagnosed by a doctor. You don't diagnose yourself and just turn up and say, can I have some money,
how do you get to see a
please?
doctor?
That 22% figure, it's about 9 million of the workforce. That includes students, well, they're working. It includes people who are caring for others at home. And it includes people who've retired early. So I think that figure gives a wrong impression about Britain. For that figure, 1 in 4 thinking of giving up work, well, they haven't given up work, they're thinking of it. I'd like to see a previous figure so you can gauge how that has affected over a period of time. Because it's often younger people, particularly if you live at home, you almost have an option. You can say, right, I'm going to give up work and I'll live off mum and dad for a while. You have options. And I would also like to see what the figure is, say, for people 60 to 66 who are working, whether they're thinking of giving up work. Because you tend to have the people who can give up work tend to be younger and older, while those in the middle, if you're bringing up kids and you have a mortgage, you can't.
Do you not think there's a generational change going on? Because certainly when I think back to all the kids who left school when I did, some of my contemporaries who went to university and then left university and got jobs, it never occurred to them not to go to work. It simply wasn't a factor in their life plan. There does seem to have been a generational shift.
Yeah, I agree.
However you quibble about the figures, and you're right to, there does seem to be a trend that young people think that not going to work is an option for them. It's a life option.
Because they can have benefits that weren't around as much. And I think it's an absolute crisis.
So,
an absolute crisis.
The Health Secretary yesterday on the Laura Kuenssberg show, which I was a panellist on, so I was sitting in the studio when he was asked by Laura Kuenssberg about this report that neurologist Suzanne O'Sullivan thinks that modern healthcare is over-diagnosing people, not necessarily making them healthier, but perhaps doing more harm than good. She says we did have an underdiagnosis problem in the past, particularly with problems like autism, ADHD. We didn't recognise people who needed help, but we've overcorrected. We've been working on the assumption that the more we diagnose, the healthier you can make the population. That was probably true to a point, but the improvement isn't sustained. And, Evan, I think a lot of people watching may agree, generically, there seems to be an overdiagnosis. Everybody, this kind of stereotype cliché, everybody's got something right now. If you are actually someone with a condition, it is almost impossible to see a doctor. It's almost impossible to see a GP anyway. But if you want to see someone about anxiety or depression or to have ADHD or autism diagnosed, I think there will be viewers going, overdiagnosis, I can't even get an appointment with a mental health professional. Yeah, the health service that the UK Health Secretary now runs directly in England, where he's got rid of NHS England, he's taken direct control. So, no, what he said will have stuck in the throats of a lot of people. And, of course, there are other people who are diagnosed, and they're diagnosed correctly, they might have ADHD, they might be registered disabled, they might be blind, they might be wheelchairs, and they go to work too. They work like everyone else. I think this is often lost in the debate, this idea that people, it's a work-shy country. We're not a work-shy country. We work longer hours than most of the European countries. We have fewer bank holidays.
We've got millions of people not working. And what's wrong with why have we got this mental health crisis of all of a sudden in the last 5 years? Where did it come from?
Well, COVID.
Because of COVID. And people work from home and they don't want to go back to work, and that's part of the problem. And we have got a crisis here, and the welfare system is about to burst.
So if streeting is right, and we are misdiagnosing too often people who actually don't have mental health issues, but we're giving them that diagnosis, what's going on there? Is it overzealous GPs, oversensitive GPs, or is it more and more people swinging the lead?
Got to be a bit of the latter.
I don't know where the evidence is, though, because we're sort of smearing a whole group of people who've waited months to get a diagnosis.
How can we have nearly 10 million people are economically inactive for working?
I've just told you where a large part of it is, and you just ignore it. It's students, people looking after other people at home, people who've retired early.
Kevin, you can defend them as much as you like.
I'm not explaining it.
It's more than a fifth of the working population are not going to work. They are too many of them.
People who retired early, people at home looking after others.
Does not explain
they are a large chunk of that 10 million.
But what about the rest of the chunk? There are a lot of people swinging the lead. They are.
You can do that.
Yeah, they are.
You can do it.
And that's why the health secretary said it's over-diagnosing mental health, and that's what he's trying to say.
You can do it.
He wouldn't put it so bluntly.
So what are we going to do about it?
Stop doing it.
One of the think tanks last week showed that the biggest increase in the 1 million people extra who are now registered, sick and disabled, receiving benefits, the majority was just a small majority, but it was a majority, are mental health issues. Well, let's tackle the mental health issues. But a lot of people with mental health conditions, physical conditions, disabled, go to work too. Let's not forget this when you're paying everyone as work shy.
But you defend everybody. You're always on the side of the skivers.
No, I think Kevin and I both probably agree that until we can see the evidence, it's because what do we do? Reassess every single person.
I do not believe 22% of the working population is not fit for work. I don't believe it.
No, students, people who retired early.
I don't believe
people who are looking others at home are in that 22%.
And that's why the benefits bill has gone through the roof, and why this government said they were going to try and cut it, and now they've backed off.
They have backed off. Right.
I think they've considered it, but the backlash is such.
Exactly.
Both internally within the Labour Party and new Labour MPs, even loyal Labour MPs, people who owe their jobs to Keir Starmer are saying this is a step too far. Never mind wider society. There is no way if somebody is unable to work because of their physical or mental condition, there's no moral case for making life more miserable.
So you don't think that the PIPs will be frozen? You think that they'll back away from that completely?
I do. And under this programme last week, Richard, two ministers, Alex Norris was one, I've forgotten who the other one was, refused to say, which was staggering, Matthew Pennycook, that they refused to say that people who are genuinely incapable of work because of their disability would not necessarily have their benefits frozen. That was staggering. For Labour ministers not to be able to say that. So it's not... And that's not briefings by the health secretary. That has come from government. And that's why they were unable to respond.
Benefits automatically, unless the government stops it, go up by inflation every April. Pension, state pension, you pay into it, it goes up by more because it goes the highest of wages, inflation, or minimum 2.5%. Of course, wages now are going up around 4.5%, 5%. Inflation's around 3%. So your benefits go up by 3%. You're not increasing your living standard. You're just, you're staying still. And anyone who thinks the system is really generous should give it a go. Because it's not. I'm all for reforming the welfare state. And we were told, for instance, the two-child benefit cap keeps about 500,600 kids below the breadline. We are told we have to wait for a review for that. And all of a sudden, they're cheese-pairing the system to save money.
How much internal damage is this doing to the Labour Party? At cabinet meetings, has there been blood on the carpet in the last couple of weeks?
Well, there are at least three ministers we know. Angela Rayner has been very opposed to it.
Ed Miliband,
and Lucy
Powell.
Yeah, there's a big problem. There's a big problem. And the reason they're backing off is because I think, even though they have a huge majority, there was going to be a major vote. Because if they were going to cut the PIP payments, they'd had to have legislated. They'd had to have legislated, and there'd have been a vote, and that would have been very damaging.
Yes, and of course, when you have a vote, it's then public what your local MP voted.
And that's held against them right to the next election.
Well, it was winter fuel allowance, where the opposition parties keep demanding votes, so they get all those individual Labour MPs could be registered as voting to cut winter fuel, so they can then use it on election leaflets in the future. The truth, the uncomfortable truth for somebody like me is cutting benefits and doing that work-shy skivers line that we heard there, which I think is totally inaccurate and horrific, because it's not true, is popular. but with a Labour base, people who vote Labour, they did not vote Labour for people in wheelchairs to have their lives made worse.
But it looks like, so they've pulled back from freezing PIP benefits.
Yeah.
They may still change the eligibility for PIP because 1,000 people every day, I think, sign on for the PIP personal independence payment. That's going to be controversial.
Yeah.
And they may cut other welfare benefits. So can I just ask...
Incapacity benefit is one they're going to look at.
Wes Streeting says, I think the moral of the story is don't believe briefings and sources. These briefings and sources did not come from journalists making them up.
Invented.
These would have been
Coming out of government.
briefings...
No, that's right. Some would have been some would have been speculative, and maybe people weren't in quite a position to know. But it's quite clear they have considered freezing personal independence payments
But
in order to save
can I ask,
money.
Kevin, did they put out something quite dramatic in order that when they pulled back from it, what they actually do looks less cruel?
I just think that it is an old trick, but I don't think it's happened in this case. I think they genuinely thought they could do this, and they were taken aback by the reaction on their own backbenches.
Right.
That would be to give them a degree of competence and ability that's been lacking.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Listen,
So they genuinely thought
They did.
that they could freeze PIP, which would cut the benefit to some of the most severely disabled people,
Which is...
and that they would get that through.
That's right, which is between 1,500 and about 9,500 a year if you're assessed.
Right,
So yes, yes, they did.
Yeah.
Now, changing who can qualify, even changing the rates, it doesn't say it has to stay like that forever. There might be a case to raise some payments and widen some eligibility. There might be a case to reduce some eligibility. But if you're doing that as part of a complete overhaul of the welfare state, I'd go for it. But then the two-child benefit cap would have to be going. The moral case? The moral case is the Trussell Trust gave out a record 3.1 million emergency food parcels last year. The moral case is half the kids who live in poverty are in homes where somebody works, so there's low pay in the benefit system, not a system. The moral case is the WASPy women weren't given what they were due. They were betrayed. No, but if you're going to change the welfare state, I'm all for it. But you would have to make it. If you're going to make make it better, you've got to come up with an argument for it rather than just saying we're cutting to save a few bob.
Can I just ask you all a question? I've been away for a fortnight and I kept my phone off as much as I could, and I've sort of come back to catch up. And I saw a cartoon on one of the Sundays yesterday, which basically showed Labour stealing the Tories and Reform's clothes, running off in their clothes. And I thought, is that what's happening here? Is that actually what's happening? Have we got a Labour government that's moving so far to the right, so far to the centre, certainly, that it's sort of becoming the government you would have got if you'd voted Tory?
If you listen to Tony Blair's last speech at the Labour conference when he was Prime Minister, I have to go back, I think 2007 for it, he made a big speech on welfare reform, got to get people off benefits and into work and so on. There's always been that streak. Look, it is the Labour Party, it's the Labour, it is work, but it's also about looking after people who can't work or aren't working for whatever reason at the time. No, there's always been a streak of Labour, which they don't like to talk about, and you'll say it's never there, but it is deporting people, enforcing Britain's borders, and it is being tough on the welfare state.
It's remarkable, Andrew. We had a Conservative government that did a record rise in tax rises and paid for a lot of people not to work during the COVID pandemic, and now we've got a Labour government which is cutting money for pensioners and cutting welfare and cutting foreign aid.
In all the years George Osborne was Chancellor, he never, ever considered freezing the PIP payments.
No.
Not
Hang on. They went for a reform. I remember Cameron getting criticism over it, and there were questions at Prime Ministers. Questions.
Well, they didn't do it.
Of course, he could say, "Well, look, I'm the father of a disabled child, and also his father too was disabled himself, or he was a stockbroker and had rather a lot of money."
Headline on the front page of the Times this morning, the Thunderer: British troops could be kept in Ukraine for years to come. They're saying that if we do end up sending peacekeeping forces to Ukraine, they could be there for maybe even a decade.
I think it's madness. Just sending them, I think, is madness. And Lord Ricketts, Peter Ricketts, the former National Security Advisor, said you've got to be very wary about this because they're not peacekeepers in the sense of being neutral. We're on the side of Ukraine. We've supplied weapons, and quite rightly, to Ukraine. We've imposed sanctions on the Putin regime. you're going to get fired on. And you fire on, you fire back, and then you get sucked into a much bigger and worse war. I think it's. I think it's where we need a debate around this. Unfortunately, all the political parties seem to be going the same way at the moment and marching towards it, and I think that's an error.
They've got a major recruitment crisis in the army and the military. That's not going to be helped by putting boots on the ground on Ukraine. I don't think there's any public support for it whatsoever.
I'm sure there'll have been.
I do not think people want their young sons or daughters going to be on the ground in Ukraine. They could, where they will be exposed to Russia, a vicious enemy.
I'm not quite sure about people who sign up whether they recoil in quite the same way we do. I didn't find that over Afghanistan and Iraq, although families later did, when their loved ones were returning in coffins at. Wootton Bassett. But I think we've got to be very, very cautious.
Things have gone a little bit still at the moment in the negotiations for peace in Ukraine. The Finnish Prime Minister, who was on Kunsberg yesterday, was very straightforward. He says he thinks the chances of a negotiated peace are close to zero. He thinks this is going to go on and on and on.
Yeah, Finland's now joined NATO. It was neutral for a long time. NATO's now right up on the Russian border there. That's 600-700 miles. That's backfiring on Putin. But I think, look, it's what's really changed in the last couple of months. What's changed is basically the US flipping. That Donald Trump has come in instead of being wholeheartedly behind Ukraine.
Is Putin playing Trump?
It appears to be so. You do wonder what he's got on him, or whether he's just, Trump is just his useful idiot.
But he has got the Ukrainian leader talking now of a peace, and because Ukraine can't win this war. They can't. We know that. But they haven't got the military might to win
Ukraine's always wanted peace, always spoke of peace, but it was Putin, the invader, didn't want peace because he wants to hold on to what he's got.
We want this war to end.
We do.
Can we talk about online safety? Because there's a big development today, which is Ofcom will start enforcing the Online Safety Act's illegal content codes. It feels to me like the internet companies are way ahead of Ofcom. I mean, we kind of have... It feels so slow, like wading through treacle to try and get this stuff taken down. So from today, all websites will have to show they have systems in place to remove illegal material. If they fail to do so, the regulator can get a court order to block platforms or impose fines of up to £18 million.
Peanuts to those people. Nothing.
Right. We have looked this morning. There is material that the Southport killer looked at before committing his crimes.
It's still online.
It is still online.
It's shameful.
Despite the fact that should not be online. It was already not legally supposed to be online, and it is still online.
But that both shows, one, the internet providers who say, oh, we'll always take off harmful content, blah, 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 aren't doing it. And two, Ofcom, the law, is always behind and it's always having to run to catch up. And I think it will need a few high-profile cases of naming, shaming, and fining.
What could be more high-profile than the Southport killer?
What will happen then? There will be a kickback from Trump and Vance, who are saying these are US technology companies.
Free speech.
You're infringing free speech.
And won't it just force it onto the dark web?
To some extent, yes, but you can ban handguns. They're going to exist. We're in the underworld or criminal group, but you kind of keep pushing it back, and then you've got to try and somehow.
So what more should Ofcom be doing then?
The dark world.
Well, an £18 million fine is peanuts to these companies.
They won't want it, though.
They make billions and billions and billions. They've got to be shamed, haven't they? They've got to be shamed.
I think they're shameless.
But they are shameless.
Yes.
Actually, that's part of the problem.
I sometimes feel when I look at them before parliamentary committees or being held accountable in other public spheres, they just kind of few warm words, and they're like blancmanges. They don't want you to be able to get a grip of them because they're making money. They want eyes. You get it? That's what they want. They want people to look at all this content because they're getting money.
We have a Sunderland supporter in the studio this morning. He sits opposite us. How are you feeling?
Is this because Newcastle have won the Carabao Cup 70 years without silverware You are an arch rival.
We are. Look,
Will other football fans be celebrating, Kevin?
Look, I know a lot of Newcastle fans who are friends, and I can kind of sort of enjoy their enjoyment, but it's... Oh, I'm not going to hear the end of this.
Why are you so resentful?
Since they hadn't won a trophy in this country, a major trophy, since 1955. That was 70, and it was a drought I wanted to continue. We won the FA Cup in 1973. For 52 years, I've bored them by going on about us winning the FA Cup.
Yeah.
I'll be dead before they have 52 years of pleasure from this. That's my only sanctuary.
I met some very nice Newcastle fans on the tube the other night, and I'm very pleased for them. Ian from Whitley Bay.
Yeah.
He was here for the final.
Was that him? No.
But it is. For them, you can... You know, when you have friends... I come from a place, South Shields, it's a mixed community.
Of course it is.
You have Newcastle and Sunderland, so
Who did they
you're not
beat?
mad about it.
Who did they beat? Liverpool.
Yes.
Liverpool, yeah.
But it is...
Well, I'm very pleased for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to happen at some time. It's just happened.
Just thought we'd end on a high note for you.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you later,
we'll
guys.
See you. We'll ask the Minister about all of that. Well, not all of those issues, but particularly about PIP payments, about welfare cuts.
And all the briefings came from them, not from us.
Yeah.
The victory for Adrian and Joanne from Essex, who were fined £1,500 for completely unknowingly bringing a migrant into the UK and then reporting that to the police the moment that they found him. He was hiding in the bike rack of their motorhome, and they discovered that when they got back from a trip to France.
There was a huge outpouring of support. Even the Prime Minister shared his concern over the matter in the Commons. Now, Adrian and Joanne have been told that the fine has been cancelled by the UK Border Force, and they join us this morning from their home in Essex. Well, welcome back on to Good Morning Britain. It is great to see you, and fantastic that since we last spoke, only a few days ago, what have you heard?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Yes, we received an email late Friday afternoon, but because we were on holiday, I hadn't checked our emails till sort of Saturday afternoon. And the Border Force had written to us and said the liability to penalty still stood. However, they had taken our objection to liability into consideration, and we'd hit all the points, and they've decided to lower the fine to £0.
So hang on, they're saying that they're not going to fine you, but they're still insisting that you did something wrong.
I don't think it's called a criminal offence, but it's still classed as negligence, and it does say in the letter that the penalty, the actual liability, still stands.
Got to tell you, you know, you've had worldwide support on this. I was in America last week, and you were on American news channels. They were saying what a ridiculous enforcement of the law it was. You're famous in America.
Wow.
Joanne, just...
We never knew that.
Yeah, Joanne, remind us what happened. For anybody who wasn't watching last week, you get back from Calais, you topped up at Carrefour, but you arrived back home in your driveway, and then what happened?
So I always empty the front. My husband always comes round, does the back. He's obviously come round, gone to take the bikes off, lifted the bike cover and seen some trainers. And he suddenly thought, oh, I don't remember leaving trainers there. And then he looked again, and then there was obviously a set of legs attached. So he's looked and then realised there's a person under there and just shouted at me. And he's gone, Joe, phone the police. So straight away I phoned the police, and, we've just waited 20 minutes, half an hour for the police to come. And, and that was it. We had to keep him on there because we didn't know if he was dangerous or how old he was, how big he was or anything like that. And, so we literally waited till the police came, and then we let them unzip it and get him out.
And the police didn't accuse you of doing anything wrong, did they?
No, nothing. No. I think they were in shock, to be fair. The same as we were.
It's
also,
not their normal attendance, I would say. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you'd done your public duty. I mean, the second that you realised that you had a stowaway on board, you called the police.
Yep.
And, of course, what you were saying afterwards was that because of what happened to you, although the fine has now been completely abolished, as it were, if that happened to you again, you'd think twice about calling the police.
I think our biggest concern is that this hasn't seemed to have changed, and it's gone like viral, as you say. So everyone who sees this is now going to think, well, do I call the police or do I not? Will I receive a fine or will I not? And I feel government, border force or whoever, what department needs to make this public that this won't happen if people call the police.
We need changes.
How do you feel about the fact that in that letter you've got, with the very welcome news that they scotched the fine, as I said at the beginning, that they're still saying that you're liable, that you did something negligent and wrong. How do you feel about that?
A bit grieved, really, because in our objection to liability, we've done everything that's reasonably practical, everything you could possibly do. For example, if someone did decide to climb on the roof of the motorhome, are we supposed to now carry a ladder so we can get up onto the roof to check the roof to see if anyone's on top of it? I mean, I think it's a bit of a farce, some of it.
Joanne, let's just let you know what the Home Office told us. They confirmed the fine had been reduced to zero. They reiterated their previous statement, saying, we are fully committed to stopping people from illegally entering the country and cracking down on people smugglers, which is why the clandestine entrance civil penalty scheme is there to ensure drivers take every reasonable step to deter irregular migration. When you hear that, you know that the penalty's been reduced to zero, still feels slightly like you're being held responsible. What will you do next time?
Oh, well, you know, everything we possibly can, but, you know, we won't have a bike cover on, for starters. That is now not going on. The bikes will have to get wet. But I just find this so sad because there's pensioners out there that, you know, we're holiday makers and I think, you know, they're expecting you to absolutely check everywhere. Well, some places you just can't get to. How can the elderly do it? You know, this is all wrong. They need to make changes. You
were in Poland until last night, weren't you? Did you do anything differently when you left Poland?
We flew, actually, Richard, so we went with a group of friends.
Well, I hope you checked the hold. I hope you checked the hold, you know, and looked under all the seats.
Case.
Adrian, Joanne Fenton, I am so glad that you do not have to pay the £1,500, and I think everybody watching will think it was not your responsibility
100%.
if some lad or chap gets into your bike rack and covers himself up with the bike cover.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you very much indeed. Stay safe. Enjoy your
support.
motorhoming. We're very glad to talk to you.
I think everybody gave you their support, didn't they?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. An investigation by The Sun newspaper this morning has claimed that influencers on TikTok are showing people how to claim new cars for a fraction of their cost on a taxpayer-funded disability scheme.
And that comes ahead of the government's planned changes to tighten the eligibility criteria for certain welfare benefits. Someone who these changes could impact is TV personality, disability advocate Kerry Riches. Now, she uses her PIP payment to pay for her specially adapted car. Very good morning to you. This is the Motability scheme.
It is indeed, yeah.
OK, so talk to me about PIP.
Yeah.
Because there's so much discussion of it.
Absolutely.
And yesterday, the Health Secretary was asked, are you going to freeze PIP payments? He didn't rule it out, but it is generally considered that there is not going to be a cut or a freezing of PIP payments. But what are they? You claim it.
Yeah.
What is it?
Absolutely. So 16 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I didn't need any help with regards to a personal independent payment at that time. But 9 years ago, I got diagnosed with a benign brain tumour, a prolactinoma, which had a huge impact on my MS. As a result of that, my doctor actually advised me to look into PIP. I wasn't able to drive my car anymore, my conventional car, which was a manual car. So I needed an automatic.
You mean you couldn't use your legs to work the pedals?
Absolutely that. Well, I could use my legs, but I had drop foot in my left foot, so I could only use my right. So actually, an automatic would be the best way forward. I qualified for the top range of the Motability element, the mobility element, which was around £400. But if you didn't take the money, which I didn't want the money, I've never qualified for a means-tested benefit, you give it back to the government and you exchange that for a vehicle or a mobility scooter or a motorised wheelchair. Then 3 years ago, when I had to get my new car, because every 3 years you have to get a different one, my mobility had... it was significantly impacted, so I now use hand controls.
The whole thing's run by the hands.
Exactly that, yeah.
What do you make, then, of this investigation by The Sun this morning, which says there are influencers on TikTok showing people how to claim for a Motability vehicle, and critics reported in The Sun saying that this is ripping off the taxpayer?
I want to go and look at that. I want some tips. It's the hardest thing I've ever been through. It really is the hardest thing I've ever been... And every 3 to 5 years, I need to be reassessed. It is degrading. It makes you focus on everything you can't do rather than things you can. I sit there and sob. It's a 40... Oh, my gosh, it's the worst. It's the worst thing I ever do in my life. And it's why I went to the Labour government's conference last year, because I spoke to Sir Stephen Timms and I said to him, for someone like myself with multiple sclerosis, it is a progressive disease. There is no cure for my disease, so why do you keep reassessing me? Please, can you give it... When I was on DLA, Disability Living Allowance, before PIP, I got an indefinite award. They knew my MS wasn't going anywhere, but PIP insists on reassessing us. And every single time, it's a 40-page back and front document. It's not easy.
So, although I completely accept your reality of this, that you find it very hard to claim, what do you make of this, then? Let's move from The Sun to The Telegraph. A few days ago, The Telegraph said that the surge in the number of people claiming disability benefits has seen... I find this extraordinary, has seen the number of Motability customers rising by 200,000 people over the last 2 years to 815,000. And such is the scale of this increase, they say, that 1 in 5 new cars sold in Britain today comes from Motability.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an extraordinary increase.
It is an extraordinary increase, and I can believe it, and I'm under no illusion that something needs to happen with the PIP process. I don't for one second...
Sorry, hang on, to stop there.
Yep.
So you're agreeing that some people are getting Motability vehicles that they don't deserve?
I would say that appears to be...
Right.
That appears to be the case. It's a really difficult process. I put on my social media last week because I'm scared. The reality is if my PIP gets taken away from me, I no longer have independence. I'm going to struggle to be a mum. I've got a 16-year-old. I'm going to struggle to work, come here today. It's going to be really tough. But
if you find it so hard to renew your Motability qualification, why so many people who you accept don't deserve these cars, why are they finding it so easy to get them when they don't deserve them?
I can only assume, and please forgive me if I wrongly assume this, maybe in the last year, due to COVID, more people have decided to claim, and we have got such a backlog. Some people are telling me on social media, I did a story last week, people are telling me they applied for PIP 2 years ago and haven't heard. So I'm wondering if maybe they are bypassing maybe an assessment process. But I can only speak of myself, and every single time I've applied for PIP, I've had to go through a very, very laborious assessment where I have been judged, I have been asked to walk when I can't walk, I've been asked how many times I wet myself. It's a real
Is that partly, do you think, because these people who are cheating the system are tarring people like you with their brush?
Potentially, Richard.
Yeah, that's what's happening, isn't it?
And that's what really scares me and really worries me. I've got 3 case studies here from people that really have stuck out for me, and one is a disabled follower living with her 16-year-old disabled son in her lounge. The reason why they live in the lounge is because it's the only room they can afford to heat, and if they remove her PIP, she will then no longer be able to eat, and they already access a food bank.
Now, you say... So, just want to establish, you say if they remove her PIP, there is no suggestion that people on PIP are going to have their PIP payment removed.
OK.
The proposal was that PIP payments could be frozen, which effectively would be, perhaps a reduction, because if it didn't keep up with inflation, it looks like a cut. But I don't think there was ever a suggestion that it would be removed
completely. I think what this lady was trying to explain to me is that actually she only heats one room at the moment, and with the cost of the heating, the heating tariffs going up on the 1st of April as well, it's just going to be catastrophic for her to be able to afford to live.
I think that the point you're making, and it's really interesting, because Wes Streeting yesterday said, don't believe the briefings, don't believe the leaks, don't believe all these sources. Wait until the announcement is made on Tuesday. But if you don't clear it up as a government, people start to think the next letter, the next brown envelope that comes through my door is going to be taking something away from me.
Absolutely.
How much anxiety do you think has been generated in all of this?
I've never, ever felt anything like it. I put on 3 stories last week. I had nearly 800 messages.
From people worried?
Absolutely worried. You know, one guy in particular has already reduced his hours to £10, to 10 hours a week's work. His kids are older now, and to be honest, if he loses any more money, what's the point of living this daily nightmare? People have told me they're going to take their lives if their PIP doesn't continue to go to the rate of inflation, because people cannot afford to live. And I want to support the late, and that's all I keep saying on my social media. Let's not worry about what we don't know at this time, but we need to now know what they're going to do.
We'll know tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll know tomorrow. The figures will come out tomorrow.
But, you know, last week we asked almost every minister while I was on air, can you clarify? They couldn't. They said wait. But in that wait, the anxiety increases, doesn't it? Kerry,
please, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
I've always said, like I said at the Labour conference, don't talk about us without us. Please invite me. I want to be round that table. I want to be part of these discussions. I do know what I'm talking about. I've been disabled since I was 24. I'm now 41. So whoever wants me round that table from the government, I'm here and I'm ready.
Well, it's interesting that you said earlier in this interview that you're as frustrated and as annoyed with the people who are cheating the system as the government
I
are.
am.
So you're coming from the same place in that sense.
Definitely.
Yeah. OK,
Thank you so much for coming in this morning. Well, the Department of Work and Pensions said we have been clear that the current welfare system is broken and needs reform, so it is fairer on the taxpayer and helps long-term sick and disabled people who can find work to find employment, whilst ensuring it provides support for those who need it most. If you're affected by any of the issues we're discussing, there is advice and support at itv.com/help. Joining us now, Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Emma Reynolds. I know you're here to talk to us about the war on red tape, but a lot of people with disabilities feel like you're launching a war on their welfare. Can you confirm that the government is not going to freeze PIP?
Well, I'm not going to comment on media speculation because the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions will this week set out further details of our reforms. But we have a social security system which is failing lots of people. It's failing young people. 1 in 8 young people now not in employment, education or training. We need to ensure we embrace the talents of that generation. It's failing nearly 3 million people who are out of work. We're the only major economy not to have recovered our employment rate since the pandemic. So this is about introducing more tailored support for people who are out of work but who could work with some extra support.
We're talking about PIP, and that isn't an employment benefit. That is for people. That is for people with disabilities whose costs are greater because of their disability. And a huge number of people are very, very anxious because they heard the briefings and the leaks and the sources. You call it media speculation, but these leaks did not come because the media made them up. They have heard these briefings, leaks, speculation, and thought that you are going to freeze or cut their personal independence payment. It's very easy, therefore, to just rule that out.
Well, as I've said, I'm not going to make an announcement on this morning because the Secretary of State, Liz Kendall, will be doing that later this week. But what I can say to reassure you and the lady you had on earlier is that those with severe disabilities and the most vulnerable will always be protected. We are reforming the system precisely because we believe in the safety net. We invented the safety net back in 1945 when the Labour government back then created the welfare state. All of our reforms will be according to our values of equality and social justice. But we also believe in the dignity of work. And we know that the current system is very binary. It says either you can work or you can't work. And we need to ensure that there is tailored support for those who could work if they were given more help. And we've already launched a number of pilots across the country to bring together the support provided by DWP and the NHS because people need that extra support, tailored support, to get back into work. But too many are locked out of work right now, locked out of the dignity of work.
Well, in this vacuum of hard information, which presumably will be filled maybe as early as tomorrow, there is anxiety not just in members of the public, but in members of your own party. I'll quote you 2 newspapers this morning. The Guardian, they have a Labour MP, unnamed, saying that the party and the backbenchers are approaching the days ahead with, quote, absolute horror. You have another Labour MP telling the I newspaper that, quote, I've heard a lot of colleagues saying that this feels like a Tory approach and not a Labour policy. So let me pick you up on that point. Did people who voted Labour a few months ago, have they ended up with a Tory government?
We are not a Tory government. We are a Labour government. And as Liz Kendall has said, there is a Labour case here for reform because we believe in the dignity of work and we believe that there are far too many people who are being failed by the current system. We inherited this mess from the Tories. There was no plan from them to reform it in any significant or meaningful way. And as I've said, the current system is too binary.
What do you say to people who say that the Labour Party in the last couple of months has effectively stolen the Conservatives' clothes, and not to mention some of Reform's underwear as well?
Well, I'd say that's complete rubbish. We had a Labour budget last year that raised taxes on business, and that was obviously controversial and difficult, but we did so because we had to restore economic stability. We had a £22 billion fiscal black hole, and also we are determined to deliver on the change that we promised the British people, to get the NHS back on its feet, to invest in our schools and in our hospitals, and to put more police on the street.
And the economy shrank in January, so how do you feel that's working out for you?
Well, we have had a difficult inheritance. We've had stagnating economic growth for over a decade, and we haven't been able to turn that around in 8 months. But we are laying the foundations to kickstart economic growth, which is why today we are launching a regulatory action plan, and regulators are coming in to see the Chancellor in Downing Street, because we need to streamline regulation, get rid of duplication, which we have talked about last week, obviously, in terms of folding NHS England back into central government, into the Department of Health and Social Care, because we had too much duplication between the Department of Health and NHS England.
Can I just also, you're going to, are you summoning regulators to Downing Street to tell them that they're axed? Because as you suggest, you know, a number of regulators are for the chop.
The regulators that are coming in to see Rachel Reeves this morning will not be axed.
So if you're not invited, are you likely to be axed?
There are many regulators in the country who are not being invited today, because that would be a very large room in Downing Street or the Treasury. We are folding some regulators into existing regulators. That is to streamline procedures. It's to make sure that companies who want to set up and do business here don't have to jump through 2 hoops. They only have to jump through 1 hoop.
OK,
that
so
is a common sense approach.
what are you going to do about the 27 new quangos and regulators that you've set up since you were elected? You've got a Regulatory Innovation Office, a National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, the Great British Energy, Mission Control, National Energy System Operator, Solar Task Force. As you say, I mean, there's not even a room big enough to accommodate the regulators that you've established, just as you say that you want to get rid of them.
There are specific reasons to set up some of those bodies. Border Security Command is about tackling the people smuggling gangs. We think that is the right thing to do. There's been an independent body set up to administer the compensation scheme for the blood scandal, the infected blood scandal. We think that is the right thing to do. But overall, we think that there is a case for folding some regulators into others. We announced last week we are folding the payment systems regulator into the Financial Conduct Authority. We are folding the regulator for companies of community interest into Companies House, so that those companies don't have to jump through 2 sets of hoops. They only have to go to Companies House. There is a common sense approach here, but what we want to do, our overall ambition, is to make the UK the very best place in the world to do business. And also we're taking forward ambitious reforms to our planning system so that we can get 1.5 million homes built and major infrastructure projects off the ground.
Just give us one brief example of the kind of red tape that you want to cut through. Give us a hard example.
So, for example, today we are announcing that applicants who are applying for major infrastructure projects will only have to apply to one environmental regulator, not a range of those. And we are streamlining some of the requirements around the protection of bats and other species. That's not to say we don't want to protect those species, of course we do, but it shouldn't take hundreds and hundreds of pages of application to do so. Okay. So that's what we're doing today. We're streamlining requirements for business so we can get spades in the ground to build infrastructure and we can build the homes that we need.
OK, well, good luck with that.
Thank you
you very much indeed for your time.